The story starts with a flashback showing how the useless father of our protagonist abused him when he was an ugly kid. He called him an eyesore, said he was an useless loser brat, and hit him even when he was eating. As for his bitch mother, she simply watched TV dramas while ignoring how her son was being badly beaten. Back to the present, our protagonist was on a school bus and had been pulled out of his reverie by Ayaka Sagu, the class president, asking Shugo Oyamada to give her novel back. However, the other guy, who looked like a delinquent, simply mocked her for being one of those sweets for brains who read romance novels. Unfortunately for her, none of her classmates seemed willing to help her. Some because they seemed too afraid to act, such as Tomohiro Yasu and Kobato Kashima, and others because they had simply chosen to ignore the whole situation, such as her younger sister, and they're pathetic. As for our protagonist, Tauka Memori, he recalled that they were on the bus for a school field trip. He also was aware that while Oyamada teased their class president, their classmates kept their heads down while the elites laughed away. Tauka also knew that if he made a noble attempt to intervene, he'd probably look pretty cool, but that would change nothing in the end since he was insignificant, even though our protagonist decided to give it a try. Sadly, Oyamada simply mocked him, saying that an air man was staging a revolt. Nevertheless, at that moment, Takuro Kirihara, who seemed to be one of the so-called elites, asked Oyamada to give the novel back to the class president. Shugo tried to refuse at first since he wanted to tease Tauka more. Takuro then told him that he would ignore what he did to Tauka, but he had to return the novel to Sagu since their exchange annoyed him. After hearing that, other students such as Asagi Ikusaba began to praise Takuro. Curiously, Oyamada didn't keep teasing our protagonist. Heck, he even gave him some points for stepping in despite being air. Instead, he began to hit Yasu. It was at that moment that their teacher decided to intervene, and he did it because he didn't want Yasu to be driven to kill himself. After all, that would complicate things for everybody. Right after, you could hear a woman casting a spell, and at the next moment, the whole class, the bus not included, had been teleported to a strange place. Obviously, all the students were startled because they didn't recognize the place nor had any idea of what had just happened. At that moment, a silver-haired woman who wore a strange and revealing dress welcomed them, saying they were their only hope of striking down evil. The woman introduced herself as a goddess called Vicious and explained that whenever the vast evil known as the Great Demon Empire appeared, they summoned heroes from another world. 200 years before that evil had been defeated, but it had resurfaced once more. Nevertheless, the students didn't seem to be pleased at all. They were still figuring out what had happened. In fact, some of them still believed the whole thing was a dream, while others wondered if they had died. At that moment, their teacher asked them to remain calm so they could hear the goddess' explanation. Of course, he was only trying to appeal to her because he found her hot. Afterward, Takuro asked the goddess what would happen if they refused to help them, and she replied that they would never be able to return to their world. The reverse summoning ritual required a special element known as Demon King Essence, and there were only two methods for obtaining it. One was obtaining the heart of the Demon King, which was the source of the Demon King Essence. The other was to collect the Demon King Essence released upon the defeat of the Demon King in the crystal of a special necklace she showed to them. Right after, Oyamada stated the obvious. Those conditions were very convenient for the goddess. Nevertheless, instead of getting angry, she kneeled before him and begged them to save their world. Sagu then said that they were ordinary humans, so they didn't have the power to help. However, the goddess assured them that they all possessed powers that other humans didn't. Meanwhile, Tauka was analyzing the whole situation because he had a feeling that something was off. Right after, the goddess ordered the soldiers who were in the hall to bring a huge wolf, and then she ordered them to unchain it, allowing it to kill a man who looked like a beggar. Immediately thereafter, the goddess used a fireball to kill the creature. Of course, the entire scene frightened the students, especially the female ones. Even Oyamada and Takuro looked concerned. As for the sisters, Hijiri said their best approach was to view that world as a different planet. Afterward, they could hear some bells pealing, and the goddess announced it was time to reveal the skills hidden within them. One by one, the students extended their hands towards a crystal ball that changed colors according to their talents. Of course, as the sacred book of tropes demands, Oyamada and Takuto ended up having the strongest powers. The latter was even labeled as an S-class, while the former was an A-class. By the way, Sagu was also labeled as an S-class. Regarding the sisters, Hijiri was labeled as an S-class and her sister as an A-class. Of course, those results excited the goddess because getting one's class in a single summoning was already very lucky. Eventually, it was Tauka's turn, and he ended up having a mediocre talent. The goddess didn't even bother to label him. In the end, he had to admit that he couldn't become someone special even in that world. Remember that sacred book I mentioned before. Even Yasu ended up impressing the goddess after being revealed he had the same talents as the Dark Hero, reputed to be the strongest of all. The goddess then taught them how to use their status windows to see their stats, and our protagonist quickly confirmed his were very low. His unique skill was called Inflict Status Ailments, and it allowed him to inflict some debuff such as paralysis, sleep, and poison. Afterward, the goddess called Tauka and informed everybody that he was E-class, the lowest rank of all the heroes there. Even their teacher was D-class. Furthermore, she added that in the past, the lowest ranked heroes had always dragged down the stronger ones. So after a certain point, it was decided they would start dealing with such heroes. However, since killing them had the potential of causing a ruckus, they decided to grant them a chance. He would be teleported to a set of ruins. If he survived the ruins and reached the surface, they would interfere no more, granting him the right to live freely. Of course, those ruins were extremely dangerous. Tauka then tried to appeal to the goddess saying he had a unique skill. But she burst his bubble saying that in that world status ailment spells were generally worthless. Their success rate was low, and even when they succeeded, they barely affected low-ranked monsters. Not to mention their duration was far too short. Afterward, his classmates, Yasu included, mocked him for being a trash hero. Then, the goddess threw him a pathetic-looking bag and said it was his unique item. At that moment, Sagu tried to intervene, but the goddess knocked her out. Right after, Tauka tried to use his skill on the goddess to no avail, since she had a Dispel Bubble protective barrier active constantly. Finally, our protagonist began to cry, but he immediately realized it was time for him to show them the true self he had been suppressing that whole time. He then insulted the goddess and promised her he would get his revenge if he managed to survive. Our protagonist appeared in what seemed to be a cave, and he was scared after seeing tons of broken skulls on the floor. Almost immediately, he was attacked by a monster, but he managed to dodge, and right after he ran away from it. Unfortunately, the monster chased after him while Tauka couldn't help but panic. However, he soon realized that rather than being scared, he was frustrated for being powerless. At that moment, he wished for power from the bottom of his heart and tried to paralyze the monster with his skill. Luckily, he managed to do it and immediately ran away as fast as he could while wondering if that Minotaur was a low-ranked monster or if a miracle had occurred. Sadly, his luck didn't last and a weird-looking monster appeared in front of him. He began to cry again while saying he didn't want to die, and when the monster got very close, he tried to paralyze it too. His skill worked again, and he began to think it hadn't been a miracle. He even wondered if perhaps his skill was something different from similar magic in that world. Afterward, he checked his stats and noticed he only had 1 MP left after having used his skill 3 times. He thought he was done since he wouldn't be able to use his skill again. But he wanted to double check, so he tried to poison the paralyzed monster in front of him, and was surprised after confirming he could still use his skill despite the lack of mana. Not only that, the success rate of his skill seemed to be pretty high, and the same went for its duration. However, another question arose. At that moment, He didn't have any mana left, so he wondered what would happen if he kept using his skill like that. Right after, the Minotaur arrived. The duration of his skill was long, but it was not permanent. At that moment, he realized he simply was a background character, so no one was going to rescue him. Thus, he decided to stop relying on Andor, expecting anything from others. He began to laugh like a madman while saying to himself that from that moment onwards he would conquer it all, and for that reason, he was going to kill to survive. From that moment onwards, his fight for survival would begin. He then faced the Minotaur and got ready to use his skill one more time. Meanwhile, in a certain forest, a beautiful blonde female elf was taking a bath in a river. Tauka tried to paralyze the Minotaur, but it didn't work. However, right after he heard the system's voice which informed him that he couldn't apply the same skill to a target repeatedly. That gave him an idea, and he decided to use sleep instead of paralyze, which ended up working, making the Minotaur fall on the floor. Immediately thereafter, our protagonist successfully poisoned the monster and confirmed that although he couldn't spam the same skill, he could stack multiple effects on the same target. Of course, he didn't neglect the possibility of his skill having more constraints. At that moment, he began to feel tired and thought that consuming his natural MP should be getting to him. To make things worse, several monsters arrived, and he decided to hit them with everything he had. He was about to find out whether his MP gave out or they all succumbed to his status ailments first. Time passed and more monsters kept appearing, which had begun to drive our protagonist insane. However, he didn't give up and continued to use his unique skill time and time again. Of course, his stamina was running out since his energy was being converted to mana. In fact, he knew he was about to faint, which would be fatal because more monsters were arriving. He then laughed and kept spamming his unique skill, but eventually, he hit his mental limit. However, he didn't surrender and tried to cast his skill one more time. At that moment, the system informed him he had just leveled up. Oh boy, he had leveled up indeed. His current level was 258 and his mana had been completely restored, which allowed him to keep spamming his skill at will. He then began to wonder why he had leveled up and concluded it had been due to the two monsters he had initially poisoned. They should have probably died, which triggered the system. Tauka then smiled because that meant he could keep fighting and gaining levels without worries. Moreover, besides his own level, his subskill Paralyze began to level up too, which he attributed to the fact that he had been spamming it for a while. Afterward, our protagonist kept fighting the monsters while wondering if obtaining new skills depended on leveling the one he already had. Of course, he didn't forget that. At that moment, his top priority was getting through that situation. It was then that he noticed he could designate multiple targets at once, which made things way easier for him. However, our protagonist didn't forget the goddess since he thought that she might be the only one his unique skill didn't work on. After all, except for her, his success rate had been 100%. He also noticed that his skill had a limited range of effect because there was no target mark over the monsters in the back. Right after, he poisoned all the monsters he had already paralyzed, which made his subskill Poison level up. It was then that the realization finally hit him. Those monsters had stopped being something to fear. The creatures in front of him had become experience points to farm. Nevertheless, the good news didn't stop there. After opening his status window, he also confirmed that his stat adjustments were multiplied by his level, which meant, for example, that his MP had gone from 33 up to 8,514. He was glad that his MP had gotten the biggest increase, but he was also aware that his MP was his lifeline at that moment. After all, it was the fuel powering his unique skill, so if he ran out of it, then he would be finished. Right after, another monster died and his level went from 258 to 277. Moreover, his MP went from 8,514 to 9,141. Afterward, more monsters died and his level kept increasing up to 395. and his MP went from 19,141 to 13,35. Nevertheless, he didn't rest but began to spam sleep on the remaining monsters instead, which increased that subskill's level from 1 to 2. More monsters died and his level became 501, but he knew that there was no guarantee, so he couldn't let his guard down. Nevertheless, when he was about to use his skill on the remaining monsters, they decided to run away. It seemed they were not that stupid and finally realized that the enemy in front of them was way too dangerous. Afterward, he began searching the corpses that were on the floor and found some things he could use, such as a cape and a dagger. He then offered a prayer to their souls and decided that if he wanted to escape from those ruins, he would have to find food and water. Some time later, he realized there was nothing edible, at least not something he would wish for. So his only option to avoid dying of starvation was to eat the monsters he had already killed. Unfortunately, that proved to be tough too because even the dagger was unable to cut their skin. In the end, he had to change his approach and decided to eat those parts that were soft enough to be cut, such as their eyeballs. Sadly, he soon confirmed that those parts were not edible, which made him think that those ruins were utterly meant to destroy anyone thrown there. However, at that moment, he also noticed that the gem in the pathetic bag the goddess had given him had changed its color. Immediately thereafter, he infused his mana to it and discovered that it had gained another function. Before it could only be used as a lamp, but now it could also teleport things from his old world, such as soda and dried beef. The downside was that he didn't know how it worked or if it would produce food again, but at least it still was his paltry unique item. Several days passed, and he kept killing monsters and leveling up. He was simply massacring the monsters in front of him. At that moment, his level was 665, but that didn't seem to satisfy him. He then recalled that when he was a kid, he had thought of killing his parents in order to survive. Nevertheless, his aunt and uncle rescued him and gave him normalcy. They gave him the warmth of a family, they taught him kindness, they empathized with the pain of others, and he thought he had managed to become like them. However, back to the present, he felt nothing. He didn't shake in terror over taking a life and his mind was unburdened by it, which had begun to scare him. Eventually, his level increased up to 957 and his mana up to 31581, and by that moment he knew he had to accept the new him. Time passed, and he kept killing monsters while exploring the ruins until he found a strange door that could be opened with magic. Luckily, he managed to open it by infusing its gem with mana and found 2 skeletons that were holding hands. It seemed that he hadn't been the only one to reach that far. He then searched their belongings and found a lot of gems which he took because he might need them once he reached the surface. That zone had several rooms, and he searched all of them until he reached one that required more mana to be opened than the others. Inside, he found another skeleton, but that one had a letter that identified it as Anglin, the hero of darkness. It seemed that the goddess Vicious had sent him there by force when he stopped being useful. Moreover, the letter contained his last will. He wanted to entrust whoever had the drive to escape those ruins with something he had desperately brought that far. In the end, the goddess and her kingdom were evil, but that didn't matter because Tauka also considered himself evil at that point. He then searched the hero's belongings and found a book titled Forbidden Arts, Complete Works. It contained recipes for medicine and magic tools, so he decided to take it with him. He also found a scroll of forbidden magic, which could be his ace in the hole against the goddess. However, the thing that startled him was that inside the book there was a warning. Apparently, the thing that had killed everybody in that zone was called the Soul Eater. He kept exploring until he reached what seemed to be the exit, but he didn't let his guard down because he was sure the Soul Eater should be there, and if even the hero of darkness hadn't been able to kill it, it should be very dangerous. At that moment, he was level 1229 and his MP had increased up to 40,457. As for the rest of his stats, they all had increased up to 3,687. He took a deep breath and decided to take his chances. He kept walking and discovered a strange sculpture. It was only a female face, but on her forehead there was a gem, the gem he needed to open the final door. Sadly, when he tried to use his skill against the face, a laser beam shot against him and penetrated his hand. It had been so fast that he didn't have time to react. That complicated things for him, because he couldn't use his skill against her. He needed to get close, and above all, he needed some time to cast his skill in order to affect the sculpture, but its defense was way too tough for him. He then began to consider his options and even thought of improving his stats even more in order to break through. The problem was that no matter how powerful he became, it would be useless if he couldn't cast his skill. To make things worse, the sculpture began to move on its own to search for him, which made him realize that the Soul Eater was likely the reason for the 0 survival rate among the disposed. Tauka had finally found the final boss of the Ruins of Disposal. Outside, the beautiful elf we had seen previously stood in front of the ruins, and wondered if they would be able to wait them out there. Back inside, the sculpture was floating leisurely, but Tauka assumed she should know that he was lurking nearby. Right after she spitted some liquid from her mouth and created several monsters that had the faces of those the Soul Eater had killed. She wanted to both make our protagonist fall into despair and pinpoint his location. Shortly after, the Soul Eater went through a wall to appear in front of Tauka, catching him by surprise. She then screamed and opened her eyes to frighten him. Afterward, Tauka paralyzed the monsters she had created, but he couldn't poison them because they resembled living persons and he didn't want to cross that line. Unfortunately, the Soul Eater was amused by his reaction and created more of those creatures to crush his mind. Tauka was crying. He kept begging the creatures to go away, but they kept getting closer. His despair was reaching its peak, while the same went for the Soul Eater's ecstasy. However, at that precise moment, our protagonist revealed his true colors and paralyzed the sculpture. The Soul Eater couldn't believe what had just happened, and Tauka, while laughing as a maniac, explained that he had waited for her ecstasy to reach its peak because he knew she would lower her guard at that moment. In the end, her arrogance was going to be her doom. His subskill Paralyze increased to level 3, while he admitted that for years he had tried to be harmless, to be normal, to be kind, to the point of even deceiving and fooling himself. However, that was not his true nature. He then poisoned all the creatures the Soul Eater had created while mocking the final boss because a weak-ass human who had been sent there for disposal had managed to kill her. By the way, he also confirmed that if the targets tried and forced themselves to move while paralyzed, it caused additional damage. He then poisoned the Soul Eater, which increased that subskill up to level 3. As for the grand finale, he put all the creatures to sleep, which also increased that subskill up to 3. The next moment, the final boss released all the souls she had consumed, and those people congratulated our protagonist for surviving. They knew all the things he had done inside the ruins, but they yet praised him. Of course, the hero of darkness also appeared, and he asked Tauka to kill the goddess, a request our protagonist accepted because he also had his own reasons for wanting her dead. A big wolf, very similar to the one the goddess had used to kill that beggar previously, was running through a forest. It seemed the wolf was running away from something, and shortly after we found out that something was Oyamata, who was getting desperate because killing the monster was taking too long. In another part of that forest, Takuto killed another monster with his skill and reached level 18. It seemed that the entire class was training because Yasu was also there. He was laughing like a madman after using his dark powers to kill a monster. However, not everybody was enjoying that training. Kobato was petrified in front of a monster, and she knew she wouldn't be able to kill it. Luckily, Asagi appeared as support, although she made the other clear that she disliked being called by her surname. She even threatened her with turning her into an outcast if she did that on purpose. Asagi then told her that she had predicted their class was going to fall because it was filled with selfish lot and troublesome folks. Not to mention that the ranks had created a new hierarchy. Ikusaba was a B rank, by the way. She told Kobato that she was pretty sure that factions would become even more clear from that moment onwards. Asagi then asked the other if she would join their faction when the time came. After all, Kobato was a D rank, so she couldn't join the Kirihara group. Plus, the Takao sisters operated on their own. Not to mention that Asagi was sure Ayaka would die. In the end, Kobato should be aware of her own position within the class. Asagi then began to harass Kobato while telling her that when they took down the Great Demon Empire and went back home, to avoid losing her place in the class, she could use her body to compensate for her lack of power. Afterward, Asagi called other girls who brought a weird-looking monster in front of them. The newcomers were restraining the creature with some chains, and the harasser explained that that was the test the goddess had given them. A test that Kobato hadn't cleared because of her kind nature. That was why she had decided to help her, because her group should be strong together unless Kobato wanted to be disposed like our protagonist. Those words frightened Kobato even more, to the point that she finally used her sword to kill the restrained monster in front of her. Asagi was pleased with that development since there was one less loose end, and she immediately declared that from that moment onwards Kobato belonged to them. What the harasser didn't know was that at that moment, Kobato was crying while remembering Tauka and how kind he was. It was obvious that she felt guilty for being unable to help him. Meanwhile, Sagu woke up in a room, and after feeling a pain in her belly, she remembered the moment when the goddess had knocked her out, which meant he also recalled what had happened to our protagonist. She then went to see the goddess, who told her that what had happened to him had been very sad. She even began to cry and apologized while saying that the ritual was a strict policy of their kingdom. Hey, someone, please give her a Razzie. My goodness, she is really dreadful at acting. Right after, the goddess told her that there was no time to be sad because the ritual would still continue. That surprised Ayaka, and the goddess took that chance to explain that during the few days that she had been sleeping peacefully, the rest of the class had been tested to see if they could kill the demons. Unfortunately, some couldn't even put their blades to the demons and thus were disqualified, and those who couldn't fulfill their duty as a hero should be asked to leave. The good thing was that Sagu was not moved by her bad acting and directly asked the goddess if they were getting rid of the weak. Once the goddess confirmed it, Ayaka made clear that she didn't agree with her methods. Of course, the goddess laughed at her and said that people had different opinions, but she as a goddess was very forgiving. Tell that to Tauka. Therefore, she could still accept a slightly different way of thinking. However, those without value should still be discarded. Sagu then asked her if S-rank heroes had high value, and the other quickly confirmed it. Ayaka then said that she would do her job as a S-rank, covering for those who couldn't pass the test, and asked her if she could cancel their banishment. Bad idea. You cannot put yourself in a bad position when negotiating with a cruel goddess. The goddess was amused by the courageous proposal and praised Sagu for behaving like an S-rank. Then, she offered to make peace by shaking hands, while adding that even though it had been to calm her down in her extremely catatonic and delirious state, she had indeed punched her in the gut. Ayaka accepted the offer and sold her soul to the devil. Back with the beautiful blonde elf. She was wearing a cape with a hood while running through the forest. She was escaping from her pursuers, but she had been unable to lose them. After all, one of them, the god sword Maggot's Platon, had a skill that allowed them to track her. Although they didn't even need to rely on that skill, the woman really sucked at hiding. The rest of the pursuers were just toying with her. Their group was called White Walker, and even though they could capture her at any time, they first wanted to let her know that to run away from or resist them was utterly pointless and futile. Back with our protagonist. He had just left the ruins, and the first thing he did afterward was to check his stats. His current level was 1789, his MP was 59,037, and the rest of his stats had increased up to 15,367. In short, the overpowered tag had been acquired. He also noticed that after reaching level 3, he could set Paralyze to optional release or partial release on the head. As for Poison, after reaching level 3, he could also set it to optional release, and he could even set it as being non-lethal. Of course, both of them could still target multiple enemies at once. Tauka then decided to test those new features on nearby demons to get a proper grasp of them. Besides, he also needed a sword, which could also serve as a shield and could also handle the vanguard. After a while walking through the forest, he found some slimes. Curiously, 4 of them were bullying a small one that was trying its best to defend itself. Right after, Momori paralyzed the bullies and poisoned them. He then confirmed that after inflicting those debuffs, he could tweak them at will since every target had its own status window to adjust. He then released the debuffs and the bullies immediately ran away, leaving the small slime alone. Tauka then apologized to the slime for being late and praised it for having the courage to face the bullies. He then asked it to refrain from attacking him before releasing it. Of course, the slime didn't attack him, but when Momori left it followed him. Our protagonist noticed it and realized that it was an outcast just like him. Back with the beautiful elf, she knew her pursuers were quite far away, but their presence still remained, which meant they were just waiting until she got exhausted. That allowed her to understand their methods. Back with our protagonist, he had allowed the slime to go inside his coat, which had ended up being useful because it could see behind him. By the way, for a strange reason, he was able to communicate with the slime. He then took a break to rest and read the book until he found some information about experiments in demon strengthening. He even found how to make a medicine to strengthen a slime. Afterward, Tauka told the slime that he was going to do the run-of-the-mill vengeance act, so it would be tagging along with his selfish desires. However, he gave it the chance to withdraw, a chance that was immediately refused by the slime. Right after, he named the creature Pigimaru. Back with the beautiful elf, she was still running away from the White Walker, but the group had gotten closer, so she decided to draw her sword, cast some enchantments on her, and face them. Nevertheless, the group met with our protagonist first, who again pretended to be a weak and scared young boy lost in the woods. His acting was way better than the goddess, though, obviously, those bullies didn't miss the chance to mock him before demanding he give them all his valuables. They didn't even hide their intention to kill him, since one of them wanted to test the sharpness of his new weapon on a living person. The group underestimated Tauka to the point of starting to discuss their future evil deeds as if he was not there. Of course, capturing the female elf was within their priorities. However, their leader reminded the others that they would have to restrain themselves from abusing her because capturing her was a commission. Tauka tried to escape while the others were talking, but was quickly discovered by the one who wanted to test his new sword on him. Our protagonist begged for his life, but the other didn't listen and attacked him. Tauka then paralyzed him and confirmed that his unique skill worked on humans as well, and that the goddess had been a special case. In addition, Momori confirmed another thing. He didn't have any issues with killing humans if they were scum. Moreover, the slime supported him on that. Yeah, you are evil, we get it. This protagonist is definitely set to walk the path of the edgelord. After killing them, Tauka searched their belongings and detected the presence of the elf. As for her, she suddenly felt as if the others had hidden their presence and was scared, especially because she also noticed someone else who seemed to be uncanny. Sadly, for her, Momori used the slime as bait and she fell for it, allowing him to paralyze her after she attacked it. He then told her that he had sensed her intent to attack, but her murderous intent was laced with impurities. Because of that, he had decided to talk with her, but had still immobilized her as an insurance. He then used the partial release to allow her to talk and told her he wanted her to give him information on everything around there. Nevertheless, she wanted to confirm something before answering his questions. She wanted to know what had happened with the 4 members of White Walker. He told her he had killed them by himself and reaffirmed the fact that he was alone because he didn't want to introduce his partner to her. Moreover, he also told her that he found it best that they didn't pry into each other too deep. After all, he barely trusted her. She agreed and began to answer his questions. Thanks to that, he discovered that place wasn't alien, but Urza Kingdom's southern forest. Afterward, he showed her the scroll he had found inside the ruins and asked her if she could read it. The female elf told him that she thought it was an ancient script, a special one, but unfortunately, she couldn't read it. However, she knew someone who might know that scroll. There was someone who went by the name of Forbidden Witch. The elf had heard that she had been forced to leave the land where she lived because of her vast knowledge of the forbidden things in that world. So, if he wanted to meet with her, he would have to go to the Golden Demon Zone, a dangerous zone in the middle of that continent. He admitted to himself that she was too kind, to the point of resembling his aunt, and then told her she would be able to move in a few minutes, and that he would pray for her safety. Right after, he left, leaving her paralyzed and defenseless. Is that how you repay kindness? The edgelord vibes are strong on this one. Afterward, it was revealed that the female elf, whose name was Seals Ashrain, had been a holy knight of a fallen kingdom and a former princess of a high elven nation. Outside of the city of Millies, the female guard questions Tauka as if she had let G.F. Kennedy's assassin before him. She finds it suspicious that he's a mercenary without a weapon. She asks about his weapons of choice and where it is at. She assumes he's here to raid the hidden ruins in search of fortune. He acts like a total NPC, claiming he didn't know Millies was such a buzzing city. The guard corrects him and mentions the city is called Millies, not Mills. She hates dealing with low-level crumbs from the villages. Plus, the Lord asked them to let mercenaries in the city. And so, the guards let him inside the city, thinking he's a Matrix slave. He finds it vague that there were no body and luggage searches before entering the city. He visits an inn where the receptionist, let's just say, isn't the most friendly. He claims that a room for one night will be 2,000 makas. Tauka mentions that he's on a long trip and all of his clothes are dirty. He wants to find a laundromat that can help him clean his clothes and a shop to buy new one. Immediately, the receptionist's attitude changes like a girl's when she finds out what color your Bugatti is. Before going to the back, he asks him to state his name. Naturally, Tauka hides his name behind an alias Hattie Skull. Later, after settling in his room, he leaves his slime Pigimaru to guard the room and goes outside. In the streets, Tauka observes that the locals show no signs of suspicion towards the tourists. He concludes that they live with peaceful eyes. The town is exactly what you would hope for in a Western fantasy land. Multiple shops are selling almost everything from clothes to magical artifacts. He finishes the little exploration after observing the Adventurers Guild. Tauka eats his dinner in the hall, where a bunch of NPC wastes their life drinking like a fool. He enjoys the sketchy-looking food, but his motives are to gather information. The banquet gets louder as the spirits get stronger. They talk about the continent's army full of knights to fight the demon. However, they don't know which one of them is the strongest. One of the men claims that the Mad King Emperor Falkendotzin's holy knights might be one of the strongest. It is rumored that they have never lost a battle. And then another one reminds them about the Silver Knights in the Magnar Kingdom to the north. They also have the Magic Knights in their Urza Kingdom. Still, the man claims that the strongest knights are the Black Dragon Knights. They single-handedly burn down the holy city of Nia. Rumors suggest that only 5 Black Dragon Knights are equivalent to an entire nation's army. Tauka finds enough information for one day to head back home. He feeds Piggy Maru and sits down to relax. His first priority is to find the witch who can read the forbidden spells and collect ingredients for Pigimaru's strengthening agency. He discovers that the agent needs a giant skeleton bone to complete the recipe, forcing him to take part in the rune search. The following day, the Marquis of Land gathers mercenaries in one place to inform them about a new floor discovery. He orders them to find the Dragon's Eyes treasure. The noble family will buy the car from them in exchange for 300 gold lions. The rest of the treasure will also have a hefty price, while the mercenaries can keep the demon drops. As the mercenaries line up from documentation, Tauka sees the girl from the forest being bullied by a self-proclaimed douchebag. He claims to have the ability to know beauty without seeing anything. Her voice gives him the clues that she is the former Princess Knight of the kingdom. She dismisses his accusation as nothing but child's play. Despite this, the grandma, fledgling with no fashion sense, continues to claim that she is the high elf dubbed Princess Syrah's Ashrain. He can easily prove this theory by removing her veil, since elves are famous for their pointy ears. He confidently removes her cover and declares himself the person who found Syrah's. Unfortunately, she doesn't have pointy ears like elves, rendering his claims invalid. She states her name is Mist Barkas, not Syrah's. After she leaves, the man is so pissed off that he wants to kill her. Before entering the ruins, Tauka intends to stock up on necessary supplies. Unexpectedly, she stops him in his tracks to thank him for his previous help. He warns him that the man from before was red and full of hatred. However, Mist is not worried about him. She likes to keep a bratty attitude to be disliked by people. This saves her a lot of trouble in dealing with unnecessary NPCs. As their conversation continues, Tauka asks her for guidance in stocking up supplies for the exploration. He will also pay her for the troubles. She agrees to his proposal because of her urgent need for finances. They spend the whole evening stocking up on weapons and portions for the journey. Tauka uses his alias instead of his real name, which tells him that she is sensitive to lies. He makes it clear that both their real names are unnecessary because of their personal complications. At the end, he pays her 3 silver coins for her troubles, shocking Mist. She can't believe that he would pay her this much for a low-paying job. Suddenly, she collapses due to immense fatigue. Tauka advises her to rest at the inn, but she runs away in shyness. Nonetheless, he goes to the ruin area to find the Skeleton King. Inside, the low-level mercenaries run for their lives from a low-level demon. Tauka casts Paralyze and Poison on it and ends things with a short sword. He wanted to check the thickness of the demon. When he heads down, the other mercenary calls for backup only to find dead bodies. Tauka realizes that these demons are very low on XP, making it an insufficient way of leveling up. During his journey, he finds the man from before talking with a couple of demons. He wants to team up with them and take out Mist. He also allows them to have as much fun as possible before giving her death. Afterward, he plans to make her demon food to give him the cold shoulder. At that moment, he comes out of the shadows, alerting the 3 of them. They ask if he overheard their entire conversation. Without hearing his answer, they conclude that killing him is the best choice. After a few seconds, Tauka raises his left hand, asking them to stop. He admits that he was in the wrong for overhearing their conversation. The men love the fact that he is begging for his life. However, people see what they grow. As they attack, Tauka casts Paralyze on the 3 of them. He is disgusted with them in a good way. Maybe it is because it reminds him of his stepfather back from Earth. On that note, he casts poison to kill them. The men say that he will pay for what he's done, making him laugh. Tauka makes him realize that they are going to become demon food before leaving. Eventually, he reaches the door to the new floor. However, Tauka decides to rest up before continuing the journey. Pigemaru guards him for 3 hours straight, allowing him to sleep. Afterward, Tauka stretches his muscles and leaves the area. He finds a bunch of mercenaries preparing to head back to the surface. The saber-toothed tigers find it strange that demon corpses appear left and right without any wounds. Furthermore, they have pale skin like a vampire sucked on their blood. The leader has some reservations regarding the whole story. He will retreat for the time being to ensure his people's safety. He offers to take Tauka with him. However, he politely refuses the offer. The leader tells him to pass along the message to the other mercenaries as well. This is the best thing that can ever happen to him, as Tauka will have less of an audience. He opens the giant door leading to the new layer of the ruins only to find an empty room. He walks over to the broken table to find the Dragon Eyes Cup treasure. Any fan of an MMORPG would know that picking up the treasure would activate the statue, giving him the creepy look. He casts poison on the statue before picking it up, which is straight up cheating. He picks up the cup, wondering what's so special about the highlight of the event. At the same time, Mist enters the room. She acknowledges that resting a bit and fighting demons along the way was a mistake. This allowed him to enter the room before her. Tauka offers to give her the cup for free. He hands her over to clarify his intentions, shocking Mist. She can't understand how Tauka can just give up 300 gold coins. He opens a secret passageway leading downstairs and reveals that what he wants is down there. He is so gullible and naive to give her the cup. He is also a very kind person at heart. However, she knows that he's bluntly lying. Despite being broke, she wants to pay him back using her sword. Mist offers to become her escort because taking things for free is beyond her. Her sense of obligation is so apparent that it forces Tauka to accept her offer. However, he puts on condition that they work together. They can't dig deep into their personal affairs, focusing on keeping things professional. He also clarifies that they won't be returning in one day, and so he will not be responsible if she wants to head back. After venturing deep into the unknown floor, they encounter a giant demon. Mist utilizes her swordplay to slice and dice the monster into pieces, earning his praise. At this point, he wants to know the difference between golden-eyed demons and normal demons. She reveals that golden demons have superior experience to others. This is the reason heroes from another world hunt them down to level up quickly. Plus, they can't earn X by killing other living creatures like human. Tauka realizes that he didn't earn X points when the 3 douchebags were killed. Mist continues narrating a legend according to which the Demon Emperor releases an element which turns normal demons into golden-eyed. The gold term in the Golden Hero and the Golden-Eyed Demon is a little ominous. After some time, Tauka orders her to rest up. He casts a sleeping spell on Mist and tells Piggymaru to keep a close eye on her. After a long sleep under Hattie's sleep spell, Mist wakes up, recasting the disguise spell on her body. She is shocked to realize that her body fell asleep without her consent. Fearful, she wonders if their contract will still be in effect after such a big mess up. It takes a few seconds for Mist to get lucid. Afterward, Piggymaru starts talking to her in slime language and doesn't ask why. She asks what he wants like it's going to respond in human language. This useless exchange disturbs Hattie's dream in which he was probably going redo of healer on the goddess. He asks the slime about his problems. At that moment, Mist feels guilty for waking him up. However, no man ever blames a woman for stupid shit cause they are built this way. They enter the room, but Hattie notices that the Skeleton King is on a bathroom break. Seconds later, the ground begins to tremble. He confirms if she is also hearing the sound. Once she affirms his suspicion, Hattie orders her to step back. At that very moment, the Skeleton King slams the wall and makes a grand entrance. Mist never expected that he had beef with a freaking Skeleton King. In the meantime, Hattie realizes that the king's strength is incomparable to the other demons in the ruins. Mist diverts his attention towards the bone on its chin. She believes that is the demon's weak spot. According to her, your run-in-the-mill mercenary can't fight this demon. Not even the saber-tooth would challenge it. However, her skills are not that of an ordinary mercenary. She wants to use a skill relying on physical change. She will be in his debt if he keeps quiet about it. Honestly, Hattie doesn't really want to go through so much trouble, and so he just casts Paralyze and Poison to deal with it. All she can do is watch with her mouth wide open. Sometime later, the king dies off to the effect of poison. He collects the bone required for the strengthening agent, calling it a day. But Piggymaru diverts his attention towards the back of the room. Unexpectedly, he finds a strange egg covered in a cloth. Piggymaru tells him to take the egg to the surface. On the other hand, the other heroes grind to level up. Kirihara, the S-class hero, rescues the NPCs from danger and boasts about reaching level 24. Back in Millie's, Mist delivers the Cup of the Dragon's Eye to the noble. This catches the eyes of everyone in the area, allowing Hattie to escape. However, Mist gets away from the mob and rushes to his side. She and her pride forces her to keep thanking him for the cup. Hattie cuts to the chase, saying they need to discuss some details in his room at 8 sharp. Hattie takes the extra time to perfect the recipe of the strengthening agent from the previous Dark Hero's journal. Right on 8, Mist knocks on his door. He double-checks his watch and is impressed by her punctuation. He wants her to become his escort for the rest of the journey. Sure, the reward money is looking great right now. But Hattie claims 300 gold coins will be used up in her travels. He hates mentioning the cup in a roundabout way. However, Mist isn't giving him much ground to play in. He lays a map on the bed, revealing his next goal is to meet with the witch she told him about in the Golden Demon Zone. The area is full of demons who tend to attack in groups. Having a fighter on his side will make it easy to navigate the area. At first, he was going to hire a knight. However, Mist is the best choice at the moment. She reveals that her destination is the Genato Principality located in the northwest of the Demon Zone. She knows crossing the Golden Demon Zone is the best way to reach her destination. Still, she is hesitant about accepting the job. He knows how to push a human's button, giving her some space to answer later. She still has other routes to Genato, and so there is no haste. At this point, Hattie casually calls her Siras, making her respond to him. Without even realizing it, she mistakenly reveals her identity in a flash. He mentions that her identity was revealed when she was asleep. He realizes that Siras was hesitant to travel with him, fearing that her identity would be revealed. She explains that her disguise is cast with spirit magic. They feed on her desire to sleep, meaning she returns to normal once sleep hits. Before meeting up with him, she was being pursued by 4 White Walkers who saw her identity. But now that they have been killed, her journey has become easier. At this point, Hattie assumes that Mist is willing to trust him. She affirms his thoughts, claiming that he's a trustworthy man. He reveals his true name, Tauka, and in exchange for keeping her name a secret, he hopes that Mist would do the same. After formally introducing themselves, Mist, who now will be called Siras, agrees to become his escort. He gives her 1 blue stone obtained from the ruins from before. Upon taking a closer look, she nearly drops the stone from shock. Tauka, since Hattie is no longer needed, asks about her odd reaction. She reveals that the stone is called Blue Dragon Stone. It is said to be a stone created very rarely by the legendary Blue-Eyed Dragon. He might not believe it, but this stone is illegal to sell on the open market. She returns the stone, saying it's too precious. Tauka is tired of her good nature. He throws the stone back at her, saying she should keep it, otherwise throw it away. As the conversation approaches its end, Tauka reminds her to call him by Hattie when in public. He will honor her privacy and use Mist in public as well. Siras claims there are personal matters they have not discussed. However, he didn't call her to his room for that. He won't pry into her past, keeping the silver lining between them. Late at night, Siras cleans herself in your usual Brokey adventure way, giving us a treat. She thinks that not cleaning before meeting Tauka was a mistake. Nonetheless, she wants to trust him like a princess. At breakfast, a couple of low-level nobodies gossip about her securing a man already. Rumors have spread about her leaving his room at night, causing an uproar. However, Tauka tells her to ignore their shit and enjoy the food. He changes the topic by asking her about forbidden spells. By now, Tauka has learned that Siras places her hand on her chest before talking. She reveals that forbidden spells are basically a form of ancient spells. They were banned by the goddess, but the reason for it is unknown. He realizes that the filthy yet sexy goddess must have banned them because it can cause damage to her body. Unfortunately, she doesn't know any useful information about their origins. Yet, Tauka thanks her for revealing this much. She is glad to be of service, presenting herself as an oddball. He asks why the formal talk even when they have become friends. Unexpectedly, she noticed that this was the first time Tauka has thanked her for something, which made her excited. After breakfast, she tells him about the noble's invitation to a hospitality event. She promises to return by 1 p.m. He agrees to meet her outside the inn in the afternoon. In the meantime, he ventures deep into the forest to use that strengthening agent on Piggy Maru. On the other hand, the noble hosts a grand party to celebrate the treasure retrieval. To check for its authenticity, he has called a skilled magician with expertise in breaking illusions. Siras realizes that her true identity might be in jeopardy. Just as they promised, he waits for her outside the inn at the given time. Meanwhile, Ayaka reports everything that happened in the ruins with the skeletons and Kirihara. The goddess assures that the injured will be healed with a simple spell. However, she must join Kirihara's group, which is full of S-rankers. However, Ayaka can't join a person who puts his comrades in danger. She blatantly refuses to join his party. The goddess states that her selfishness is driving everyone down. The bitch acts like the fault lies on her part as a leader. But still, Ayaka isn't fooled by her act and refuses to comply. Moving on from that, the goddess assures her of the task of training the NPC on how to fight. They previously agreed that Ayaka would fight on everyone's behalf. However, she claims that the king has ordered her to kill the useless students. At this point, Ayaka knows that talking further would create more beef, and so she agrees to her request and leaves. Back in Millie's, he wonders if his abilities to judge a character have dulled over the years. He asks Piggy Maru to make a sound twice if he thinks that Ceres ran away with the stone, or make a sound if something bad happened. He squeaks a single time, making Tauka think that he and his slime are both good-natured people. On his way to the noble's estate, he overhears some nobodies talking about the elf princess appearing in town. They heard that she ran into the dark forest by herself. They intend to hunt her down for glory. But one of the men says it is not their time to shine. At the same time, 5 black dragon knights appear in the sky. The black knights quickly find her running in the forest with their dragon's eye. Ceres draws her sword and uses whatever wind spirits are nearby to slice its wings. Unfortunately, she can't use her disguise spell because the light spirits are confused because of the illusion-breaking guy. Defeating low-level black knights takes a lot out of her, making her wonder what the higher-ups will be like. At that moment, an arrow comes flying from her blind spot. Ceres manages to perch it, noticing that it is a decoy. She attacks the knight in front of her, which seems to be Gizun, the second in command under Master Oben. Unfortunately, she can't use spirit regalia to its full strength, making it impossible to fight. Gizun reveals that some people want her dead, which is why capturing her alive is off the menu. He intends to have some fun with her body before calling Azrael. However, Tauka arrives on the scene in the nick of time to paralyze his butt. He then casts non-lethal poison on him for future integrations. Before talking with Ceres, he puts him to sleep to ensure no third party interferes. She wants him to take back the stone and null their contract, as the knights will follow him as well. However, Tauka doesn't want to let her go, so he gives them a bag full of blue stones. At the end, he tells her to get naked ASAP, leaving her shocked. Honestly, nobody likes cliffhangers, but this was a good one. Despite having the longest ears amongst all the races, Ceres still doubts whether or not Tauka told her to strip. She gives him a "what the fudge you mean" look, forcing him to clarify his actions. He claims that the men in Millie's were able to recognize her from the same attire she used back in the Holy Kingdom. He apologizes for the confusion, explaining that she needs to strip down and change her clothes. She agrees that the elf pride inside her was deeply hurt upon hearing it. But that doesn't matter anymore. Suddenly, she asks if they are agreeing to continue the contract between them from before. Tauka gives her a proposal of a lifetime. He wants to negotiate with the Forbidden Witch to hide Ceres from the world. By now, it is a well-known fact that nobody can locate the witch. Furthermore, he still needs to learn about the secrets behind the ancient spell. For that, entering the Golden Zone is kind of necessary, and so, continuing their contract is a no-brainer move. Yet, Ceres wants to know about his motives for helping her this far. Unexpectedly, he sees her aunt in Ceres. Naturally, their looks and way of speaking are different. Neither of their personalities matches the other. However, he believes that their aura is very similar. To ditch her here would be like ditching her aunt and running away. With that, their conversation comes to an end. He then turns his attention towards the man about to die. He offers to let him live if their questions are answered honestly. The man thinks they are joking, but Tauka can just activate the non-lethal version to save his life. At this point, even the man wants to know her reaction upon learning the truth about the kingdom. Suddenly, Tauka pushes her aside, saving her from an attack from above. Sivit Gartland, the strongest hero humanity has ever known, comes to the scene. He is glad that the man died before revealing any details. Oben, however, thinks that killing the man was too harsh. Sivit claims he would have proved to be a thorn in their way, and thus the thorn was removed. He reveals that this whole hunt was orchestrated by the king. She made him turn into a vigorous male once again. However, the thought of Siras being defiled by other men was infuriating to him. The old Creed show ordered them to kill her to sleep better. One of Sivit's men wants to rotate her amongst her men as a reward before killing Siras. However, Sivit reminds him that the king ordered to have her pure corpse. Despite the one-sided situation, Sivit is kind enough to give her a chance to reclaim her life. She can fight a duel with him, and winning is rewarded with their life. She can also use her spirit regalia to fight, but for some strange reason, he is now more interested in Tauka, who has been smirking from the start. Tauka realizes that the enemies are out of spell range. He slowly closes the gap, asking to have a chat with Sivit, but before that, introduces himself with his alias. Sivit immediately sees right through him, claiming his circumstances must be tough for using an alias. Oben doesn't understand why their captain is showing interest in a pipsqueak. He explains that strangely enough, this person dares to laugh in front of the 5 dragons instead of trembling. He thinks that Tauka might be plotting something and kill them. On that note, he understands that Sivit is a perceptive guy, and lying will not work against him. Tauka continues to close the distance, demanding to ask a question. He believes that Sivit is looking for an enemy who can quench his thirst for battle. But why doesn't he fight someone like the goddess from the Lion Kingdom? Sivit explains that their kingdom and Allison have a deep bond with each other. However, he has great expectations from the heroes who are getting powerful due to the goddess's blessing. Tauka understands that the only thing excluding him from absolute pride is his thirst for battle. After all that talking, he loses the appetite for the Duke and wants to kill her. The least he can do is present her head to the Princess Catalia of Nia. The reason their kingdom destroyed their nation is because there was a rumor that Siras was hiding in their nation. They demanded Catalia to hand her over, but she refused to open her mouth, leading to her destruction. As his rants come to an end, Tauka creates the perfect survival plan. He repeats his earlier questions, asking if he is looking for an opponent who can give him the adrenaline rush. Upon getting confirmation, he offers to become his enemy. He reminds him about his praise for the heroes advancing with the bleeding of the goddess. With great caution, Tauka reveals his true name and identity as the hero from another world. He phrases his sentences in such a way that they are left for interpretation. He claims that his position is unique among all the heroes. The goddess set him free to gain experience in the outside world. He reveals that his rank is much different from the other heroes. But his ways of saying make Sivit think that he's special, not that he's an E rank. Sivit finds it interesting that the goddess holds him in high regard. He asks what the hero from the other world wants. Tauka simply wants to postpone their duel to another time. He claims that he will become stronger and kill him in one day. He will gain power that will surpass even the goddess one day. Despite his statements, Sivit asks about his methods of achieving strength. He explains that the goddess granted him freedom because she wanted him to take a different path. He will go to the Golden Demon Zone to pursue strength that no hero has obtained. Not only that, he will return to the goddess's side as promised. Sivit loves ambition and killing intent in his eyes. He allows him to live for the time being and postpone their duel. They will leave after making sure that Siras is not breathing anymore. However, Tauka claims that this won't be happening. He needs Siras to become stronger. She is just an object that will help him get more strength. He wonders if he is going to travel with Siras without the goddess's permission. Naturally, Tauka doesn't care about the goddess. He just needs Siras to get through the Golden Demon Zone. Since Sivit senses no lies from his mouth, He agrees to this request as well. Oben objects to this decision and tries to persuade him not to make this mistake. He thinks that Ceres will just go back into hiding, making her impossible to track. Sivit tells him to shut up or else his death will not be painless. Ceres also isn't comfortable about their deal. However, Tauka shuts her down, reminding her that a deal is a deal. At that moment, Sivit asks his subordinate to inform their assassin about the deal and tell him to let them pass without harm. He bids farewell and leaves with his men in the opposite direction, looking forward to their duel. Tauka grins for succeeding to fend off the attack. But that is not enough. He takes advantage of Sivit while he's off guard to cast his spell. Before he can finish saying paralyze, he turns around to attack. But the effects of the spell make him fall to the ground. He did not expect anything less from humanity's strongest warriors, yet they are nothing when facing his spells. Tauka clarifies that his story is not noble enough to make him honor his word or that type of shit. He is out for revenge, and letting the Black Dragons live is an unnecessary risk. He poisons all of the other teammates and moves to Sivit's side. He reminds him that his powers are of a different nature than the other heroes. He casts lethal poison on his body. Sivit can't understand what is happening. Unexpectedly, he can move under the effects of paralyze like the Soul Eater. Still, his movements are more fluid than anything he's seen before. Although after being hit with a combination of paralyze and poison, trying to move is just suicide fast forward. Before dying, one of his men calls for backup. Tauka activates strange markings on his face, allowing him to remain calm in this situation. He allows her to leave if she desires. However, Ceres wishes to stay, and in exchange, she wants all the blue dragon stones. Soon, the backup arrives, shocked to see the strongest humans on the ground. Sivit warns them to stay far and attack with long-range spells. Unbeknownst to him, Tauka had activated his secret technique, which eats up all of his magic upon activation. Plus, it takes a while to explode out of the box. The newfound power from the demon strengthening agent for Pigmaru allows him and Tauka to become one. This way, he extends Pigmaru's tentacles to increase his range. He effortlessly casts the same combo from episode 1. At the same time, the dragons he pointed from before die out, allowing him to rank up his skill poison and paralyze. Not only that, he gets 3 new additional skills called Freeze, Dark, and Berserk. At first, Tauka activates to realize that this ability makes them go nuts. The faster they move, the more the poison spreads. Darkness lets him blind people, which can come super handy on the battlefield. While Freeze has the same effect as in the self-explanatory name. He quickly deals with the side characters to get back home. Even now, after so many hits, even the greatest human alive couldn't recover. He taunts and passes insults, but his body gives in. Late at night, Tauka thanks her for not running the other way after seeing his dark side. She claims that letting him die will be a waste of time, especially since he has this kind expression on his face once in a while. Suddenly, it comes to her mind that the hero killer is still out there somewhere. She claims that he is the only person who has the talent to surpass the greatest human. Tauka casually confirms his dragon's skin color to determine that he killed him before. On the other hand, the goddess's substitute teacher Niantin visits the boys on the battlefield. She will take command of the battlefield whenever the goddess is not around. One of the show-offs thinks that her abilities are half-baked, but fate lets her cook, allowing her to defeat him without even the S-ranker looking at the strike. On the other hand, 3 soldiers patrolling around the area find a crystal outside the abandoned ruins. Usually it turns platinum, but this time it's different. The soldier keeps the crystal to make some extra cash. The other 2 think they should report the situation to Alien's goddess. However, the man reminds them that no one has the balls to escape the abandoned ruins. He asks if they have ever seen anyone come out with popcorn in their hands. Meanwhile, Tauka takes a stroll in the bazaar to celebrate the fresh kill spree. There, a mask catches his eyes. The shopkeeper's mask is a replica of the one the Fly King used to wear. Being a tourist in their world, he he doesn't know about the Fly King. The shopkeeper informs him that the Fly King was one of the demons who fortified an island. He created the perfect city for the demons and fought every invader that came. His name spread across the continent as the greatest warrior. However, his own people banished him, claiming he became estranged to the path of root of pure evil. Soon, his famous squadron also perishes in history, but their names are quite famous. As Tauka enjoys the lively market, Ceres decides to break in early. She doesn't want to engage in excessive activities that will use her energy. It will hinder Tauka's journey, and so she wants to be in tip-top condition to act as his sword. Eventually, he enters the tent to crash for the night. But before that, Tauka decides to change the benevolent hero look. He is on the road to revenge. Thus, becoming a demon suits him more. He proclaims that the goddess will feel the wrath of the person who sold his soul to the devil. Back in the Margar Kingdom, the White Wolf King calls an emergency meeting with the Holy Alliances. All of them can't believe that humanity's strongest fighters will be killed. The King of Urza assures everyone that the matter is under investigation, though nothing can be said at the moment. Unexpectedly, they found a piece of cloth belonging to Ceres, making them think that she is the murderer. They expected the fighters would be a huge help against the demon emperor. However, now the goddess claims they need to show importance to the heroes. The Mad King feels like this was her plot from the start. The Alien Kingdom will benefit the most from the demon attack, as every country will ask for their heroes' help. The goddess acts like she knows nothing that he's talking about. She shifts the conversation, reminding everyone of the demon's threat. Suddenly, the Mad King brings up the god-killing ritual, striking a nerve. Still, nothing can be said without proof. Nonetheless, the White Wolf asks if all of them blame Ceres for their murder. Before anyone can answer, one of his messengers inform him that a group in the Urza Kingdom is claiming to have killed humanity's strongest hero. Just as the meeting goes on, Tauka and Ceres reach the capital city of Urza. This will make their journey to the Golden Demon Zone much more smoother, as the area is just north of the capital. However, he ignores most of her walkthrough guides to check if there are any pursuers. After getting reassured, he asks about all the cheering coming from the giant Colosseum. Ceres reveals that the arena is called the Blood Colosseum. Mercenaries from around the world come to fight in the capital in death matches. The winners are handsomely rewarded upon their victory. The governing bodies are the Duke of the City and the mercenary guilds. However, initially, the Colosseum was a place where mercenary groups chose their warriors. But now, it is just a pastime for rich nobles who like to gamble and poor people who like to waste their time. He realizes that it is the exact copy of the Colosseum at the time of ancient Rome. Eventually, they visit the most expensive inn that commoners can live in. Ceres suggests that they should save money for future travels and book a single room. Tauka immediately turns around and reminds her that he's a boy, or he can just prove it in the room. She immediately turns away in shyness and says she doesn't mind him booking a single room. Later, the two of them enjoy a meaty dinner at the inn's dining hall. Tauka can't believe that a capital city is packed with people. As the two eat their food, two men start talking about the murder of the Black Knights. They start talking about the rumor that Ceres the Holy Knight was the one who killed them. They think that they had a duel, but she was injured in the process. Eventually, Ceres also succumbed to her wounds and died like a loser. All this information overloads her single brain cell, making her choke on food of all things. Tauka gives her a glass of water before her sword gets killed before the battle even begins. At the same time, the two old farts continue to talk about the rumor. They propose a theory that Ceres wasn't the killer of Black Knights. The group known as Ashinto has been going around saying they were the killers. Suddenly, the so-called soldiers of Ashinto step into the inn, introducing themselves as the Messiah of Urza. Tauka gives a closer look at them and concludes they are nothing special. In the meantime, the two men think the strongest blood fighter or the Forbidden Witch might have killed them. It is rumored that the strongest blood fighter has met with the Forbidden Witch, who is a dark elf. However, it is also well established that the witch was last seen 10 years ago. Tauka quickly slides his chair towards the two men to ask about this rumor. But first he offers to buy them a round of drinks and food. They inform him about the details and a few things about the strongest fighter. Suddenly, the strongest fighter Eve enters the pub for a bite. Naturally, he slides into her side like it's her DM to ask about the forbidden witch. Eve tells him not to believe in baseless rumors. She went to the Golden Demon Zone but never found the witch. She also advises him to stop pursuing the witch, as the Golden Demon Zone is not a place for a kind-hearted soul like him. On that note, she leaves the pub after paying her dues. Afterwards, Siraz informs him that she was lying about meeting the forbidden witch. She could hear her heartbeat with those long ears. Ultimately, they head back to the inn to call it a night. However, Tauka realizes he forgot to bring Piggymaru some food. In that moment, he is forced to use the Infinity Gauntlet from the first episode that grants him infinite items. Siraz loves bread and cheese, but he informs her that the items are random. Suddenly, a gust of wind blows her hair to the side, leaving him in awe. Yet, Tauka turns away once she notices her gaze. He starts a conversation about their future plans regarding the witch and the blood fighter. She says that their first priority should be collecting information. Furthermore, she knows that blood fighters value money over anything. They can buy back their freedom, but the amounts are insane. Unexpectedly, Eve is not collecting money for herself. She promises to free a little dark elf by buying back her freedom soon. Outside, Siraz elegantly practices her swordsmanship with the moon glazing her every move. Upon seeing this, Tauka internally compliments her skills as a blade wielder. He realizes why the strongest hero of humanity wanted to fight her as an enemy. Once she is done, he requests her to teach him how to fight in close-quarter combat. Plus, it is not right for his self-image that a girl is stronger physically. As her master's order, Siraz agrees to teach him how to fight. She leaves herself wide open for the attack. Moments later, she clarifies that she meant him to violent and not attack her from down there. Tauka, being the dimwit, already knew this part. He throws a right hook at her, but she immediately counters and locks him in position. Suddenly, her jugs touch his back, causing her to back down. She apologizes for touching him while her clothes are full of sets. Tauka, however, doesn't mind learning the forms without them physically touching. He just wants her to feel comfortable. Later at night, Siraz decides to wash their clothes. Unexpectedly, she finds herself getting wet after sniffing on his shirt. Despite liking him, she thinks that doing something like this does not benefit a lady of her stature. At the same time, he shows up at the scene, scaring the shit out of Siraz. She is scared that he might have seen her sniffing on his shirt. But Tauka wants to know where his clothes went. Relieved, she reveals that his clothes are in the washer. She is used to washing clothes and doesn't mind helping him out. As the night grows young, Tauka silently admires her beautiful face. He knows that she is the true kind of person type. Soon, she wakes up from his constant gaze. He tells her that it has been hard to sleep for a while now. That is when she pulls out a variety of herbs from the traveling bag. One of them is good at relaxing a person while the other is used to energize them through the night. Although, she finds it necessary to clarify this detail. To break the awkward ice, he prepares tea from cubes summoned by the gauntlet. She tastes the tea and immediately falls in love with it. Afterwards, she accidentally spills the entire bottle of herbs inside the cup. Tauka wants to drink the one with the wrong dosage. However, Siraz insists on taking responsibility. Unfortunately, the drug works like charm, making him lose his mind. Somehow, both of them quench their worldly desires to do the horizontal tonga. Still, he tells her to go to sleep quickly before things get out of hand. Suddenly, she asks if he is the type to resist temptation. While looking at the moon, Tauka reveals that his revenge takes priority over other things. It is like a curse, forcing him to look towards a single goal and stopping him from embracing other things. Siraz goes down her knees and promises to lift this curse as soon as possible. The very next day, she finds enough information about Eve's speed from the local pubs. The fighter is so famous that people love talking about her. She was bought off the slave market for the Colosseum. Everyone was pretty excited to see a Leopard King fight tournament. And let's just say she didn't disappoint. Eve has been the champion of the arena ever since. Apparently tomorrow is her last fight. Tauka realizes that she has earned enough money to buy back her freedom, and so using money as bait won't be possible. Siras, however, contradicts his conclusion, revealing that Eve collected the necessary amount to buy back her freedom 2 years ago. Ever since then, she has been saving money to free a little girl, a unique twist in the plot. Further, she heard that every fighter dies in their last battle instead of getting free. At first, Tauka believes that the Duke makes them fight someone out of their league. Yet, Siras reveals that it is not the case. It turns out that the Duke cheats, putting the Blood Fighters in a disadvantageous situation. Upon learning this fact, Tauka lets out a wide grin, knowing he can torment the Duke without any reservations. After learning about Eva's last battle, Siras does some digging and learns she has been fighting for a little girl. That surprise wasn't enough for Tauka, so she added another layer on top. As it turns out, none of the Blood Fighters in history survived their last match. This means that somehow the Duke and the Mercenary Guild force the Blood Fighters to a disadvantage they don't even know of. At this point, Tauka gets an idea of the situation. He explains that Eva Speed is an undefeated champion in the blood fighting arena. Moreover, she is very popular with the masses, and so they will definitely try to off her, ensuring a new generation of blood fighters arise for her ashes. Siras wonders if they are going to kill the management before that happens, but Tauka turns around, takes his time, and says why wait for tomorrow. Later at night, he visits Eva once again. He stops her in the middle of the road to ask a question. Eva thinks this is about the Forbidden Witch, and so she denies all knowledge of her whereabouts. Eventually, Tauka confronts her, calling her a liar. A man so straight is considered rude according to her. But he ignores the comment and asks if she owes the witch a favor. Eva denies his outrageous claims, forcing Siras to come out of the shadows and catch her lie. Finally, he cuts the chitter-chatter in half and comes to the point, revealing the Duke's intention to cut her 9 laughs into none. Instead of her fighting tomorrow's battle, he asks permission to capture Liz, the little girl, and escape from the city. However, Mrs. Kitty claims that the Duke and Mercenary Guild will place high bounties on their heads, making it impossible for them to live. It would be fine if it was just her, but she can't possibly think of putting Liz through this fate. Tauka, who doesn't know when to give up or notice social cues, persists that they can hide in the lair of the Forbidden Witch. Yet, Eva doesn't believe he has the balls to even enter the Golden Demon Zone after her graphic description of the place. Tauka would book her a ticket to heaven for her judgment, but he's Asian. He flexes his strength, claiming a giant skeleton king is nothing compared to him. Visually, he can tell she is totally not impressed enough for a second date. Still, he doesn't give up and reveals that the Black Dragon's knights were killed by him, but she doesn't believe him. After glancing at her Siras, she can tell that she has a strong martial arts background. However, he doesn't possess any aura that indicates the strong type. As proof, he casts the paralysis spell on her, and Siras even goes a step further, revealing her own identity. Despite all of this, Eva still wants to battle as thinks Duke won't be ruthless enough to kill her after promising freedom. He questions her naivety and asks if the Duke will grant her freedom so easily. These questions are meant to shake her resolve, but her will is surprisingly unshakable. Eva claims that she will reap what she sows, meaning she trusts in the world of blood fights, unlike their world. He understands that nothing can persuade her at the moment. Yet, the future is always uncertain, and so he leaves her with a couple of questions like what is about the blood-fighting world that makes her trust it so much, which completely shakes her. Before leaving, he tells her that they will be waiting for them at the main bridge during dawn hours. Afterwards, Siras apologizes for revealing her identity without his permission. Tauka doesn't get mad, as her strength makes the story sell better. During their walk down the streets, they notice men of the Ashinto cult who claim to have killed the Black Knights. They sealed a man's house and claimed that he slit his throat, committing suicide. To sell their shit, they make the people believe that their Lord Muaji can cure all curses. Ceres doesn't hate the cult, but the mob gathered around them. She can't believe that people can be this ignorant of reality. Soon, they come across another batch of men, trying to force a girl to come with them. She immediately loses her cool and intends to draw spirit regalia. However, Tauka casts Berserk on all of them to make things clean. All of the men start crushing each other without him putting any real effort. On the other hand, Eva tries to get some sleep before the big day tomorrow. But the conversation with Tauka haunts her. Still, she believes in Duke Zuin's sincerity and chooses to double-check things. After entering the main hallway, she overhears the Duke and his right-hand man talking about the excitement of tomorrow's match. For a moment, she realizes that all of her doubts were for no reason. However, the very next moment, the Duke asks if the preparation to kill Eva is done. The right-hand man says that he will poison her with a numbing agent before the match, ensuring her defeat. On top of that, they will make clothing out of her skin and give it to Victory. As for the Dark Elf, the Duke has some other plans for her. He is a low-key creep who wants to groom her himself. After learning the shocking truth, Eva rises in anger but manages to control it. She walks down the hallway intending on escaping and meeting up with Tauka. However, Muaji from the Ashinto pranksters stops her to wish them good luck for the match. She makes her way to the bridge, thinking that Tauka must have left already. Yet, he was positive in his plan and manipulation skills. He asks whether or not Eva learned the truth about her favorite Duke. She shares what happened, which leads to one conclusion: escaping with the girl to the Golden Demon Zone. In exchange for his assistance, she agrees to give him the whereabouts of the witch. Meanwhile, inside a broken tavern which is about to go out of business, a horizontally challenged old hag built like Big Mom forces Liz to clean the bar. One of her customers starts seeing her appeal. However, the old hag says that she belongs to a very special client. Despite this, the man comments on her cold and emotionless nature. Due to her circumstances, Liz never cries or laughs. However, the old hag reveals that she is just a tough nut to crack. She hits her hard on the back, making her stumble and cry. The man feels pity for the poor girl and asks if the old hag doesn't feel anything. But the entitled plushie thinks she should be the one showered with pity. After all the hard work, she can release some of her frustration on the kid. At this point, the man feels sorry for the girl and leaves the bar. In the meantime, she screams in her ears to scare her even more. Liz internally apologizes to her big sister Eva for not being as strong as her. Soon, she comes barging through the front door. And honestly, she didn't know that the old hag took things so far. Immediately, she tells Liz that they will be leaving the capital. But instead of ordering her around, she asks for her consent like a proper adult. When she agrees to leave, Eva decides to deal with the giant hot air balloon ready to be popped. However, the lady starts begging for her life. Eva shows mercy and tells her to mislead the guards about their whereabouts. The old lady quickly agrees and apologizes for her behavior with Liz. Minutes after, Tauka shows up at the scene with his mask on. He bangs the wooden door, which scares Liz, making her think that she is about to be hit. On that note, he tells Eva to meet up with Ceres while he does the Earth a favor. The moment they leave, Tauka gets serious with the lady. Without talking about the weather, he paralyzes and poisons her. She says that if he lets her go, then Tauka will be able to enter heaven, which makes her laugh. He claims that both of them are definitely going to hell, but that's okay if it means he can kill shitbags like her. In the end, they reunite and begin their journey outside of the city. Eva tells Liz to introduce herself to them. Unexpectedly, Tauka reveals his and Ceres' true identity without any hesitation. At that moment, Liz begs him to let her accompany them on their journey. Instead of agreeing immediately, he makes sure that she knows about the dangers of their journey. but Liz feels invincible as long as Eva is with her. Once done, Tauka introduces Piggy Maru to their new friends to avoid awkward situation later. As they exit the city, Eva reminds him that she will take him to the Forbidden Witch's lair. However, first, she wants to know his real objective for traveling to such a dangerous area. Naturally, Tauka reveals that he possesses ancient writing with difficult characteristics. Just to be sure, she asks if he has any intentions to harm the bitch. "Oh sorry, I meant witch." Tauka doesn't make any promises, instead he leaves everything to fate. He will make decisions based on threats, not emotions. Upon hearing this, Eva says that she is willing to follow him to the ends of the world. He is surprised that his credibility skyrocketed in just a day. However, even Eva can't explain the reason. It's just that Tauka could have used Liz to blackmail her into revealing the Forbidden Witch's location. But his inner good guy shined through the demon mask. Plus, she has learned to measure trust with time spent with a person. After they board the horses, Sirius asks if it's really okay for Liz and Eva joining their journey to the Golden Demon Zone. Tauka reveals that everything he does is for a reason. Having the undefeated blood fighter have your back in the most dangerous lands can never go wrong. Plus, the Forbidden Witch is also a dark elf. Thus, when she sees them traveling with her kin, the witch might favor them. The part about saving her life also adds PR points. Sirius can't believe that he thought things this far out, but by now, she understands that he likes to play with fate. With that said, they continue their journey towards the zone. But midway through, Tauka notices that they are being pursued. He stops the horses and wonders how the Duke's men caught up with them so fast. Eva reveals that she met Miwaji in the hallways before escaping with them. It would be safe to say that the Ashinto cosplayers and the Duke's elite guards are after them. She intends to handle them by herself. However, Tauka didn't bring her with him so she could die. Furthermore, she is the only person who knows the witch's lair. Understanding, Eva asks about their plan. Tauka says that fighting them head-on is their best option. He uses their horses as a diversion to lure one group away. Once that is done, he orders Eva to step back with Liz while they take care of the threat. Naturally, she wants to fight. However, he reminds her that Liz's safety also holds importance. In the meantime, he whispers a secret plan in Sarah's ears to ensure their victory. Still, Eva can't believe he can defeat all of them at the same time. That is when he informs her that they can't win head-on, then they will just use the terrain to their advantage. Tauka's initial plan doesn't work because the leader of Ashinto Maui suspects a trap inside the forest. He noticed the shattered branch outside the forest, realizing it was intentionally broken. Unlike humanity's strongest, he wouldn't carelessly enter a forest with unfamiliar terrain. And so, he asks the hidden person to come out of the shadows and surrender peacefully. Despite the sudden inconvenience, Sirius confidently steps forward with her face covered. Maji continues to play the Messiah, asking if she is the famous fly swordsman serving under the Fly King mentioned in the legends. He acknowledges that the Ashinto don't know her identity, but they will spare her life if she hands over Eve and Liz without resistance. On top of that, she will be allowed to become a member of Ashinto because her skills as a warrior are notable. However, she pushes the boundaries, asking about the consequences of refusing their offer. It doesn't take long for Maji to threaten to curse her with a fate worse than death. He also boasts about their trademark achievement, claiming the Black Dragon Knights were powerless against their curse. To lure them into Tauka's trap, she acts like their threats send shivers down her spine, thus accepting to hand over Eve and Liz only if they ensure their safety. With that, the Ashinto members start moving forward, but Maji anticipates her next move and orders them to stop. He points out that Sirius asked everyone to follow her. They don't need an army to escort 2 people. A few members would have sufficed. This indicates she was trying to lure them into a certain range without any intentions of returning Eva and Liz. With this revelation, the men maintain their position and prepare for combat. Being the worshippers of the curse god, Sirius provokes them into killing her with their famous curses, knowing they are a bunch of liars. However, Maji doesn't mind revealing their little secret before her death. Both parties know the curse god is just a front, but the truth seems unexpected. The cult was built to carry the legacy of the Assassins' Guild, who were once destroyed by an Esekhaid hero for being evil. Disguising themselves as a group of sorcerers helps them sell the curse god, but in truth, Siraz knows they use poison to kill. Reigning from the Assassin's Guild, Maji reveals they have advanced formulas of poisons unknown to humanity. But honestly, not even he expected them to venture upon the Black Knights being killed by a rare poison. It is like an opportunity to meet preparation, allowing them to become famous overnight. As for their main goal, the Ashinto want to use the Duke and infiltrate the core of the kingdom, eventually taking over the country. That aside, he can't believe swordsmen well-versed in fighting duels would face a group of assassins alone. His logic can't be argued with, but Siraz takes her mask off and claims to have defeated the Black Knights alone. The identity reveal shocks him for a moment. However, Maji still doesn't buy her crap. After not calling her bluff, Maji introduces the twin powerhouses of Ashinto Burga and Virgin, who were supposed to fight against Eve in the final match. The twist of fate is that Zarash from Fang, who cornered her, is their younger brother. Now all that's left is for Siraz to decide her next move. Furthermore, another unit of 15 men surrounded her using the art of assassination. At this point, the overconfident Maji thinks that they have won already. However, he can't come to kill a woman with such beauty. Instead, he offers her to kneel and bear his child. All she can do is follow his command and hope that Tauka will come to the rescue. Just then, he links with Pigimaru, activating Assault Excel to extend his range and paralyze the Ashinto members. After being apprehended, Maji mentions his second unit, but Tauka already killed them while he was busy blabbering. Unusually, he calls it quits and kills them before explaining his powers like other MCs. Suddenly, he notices a first wave of men coming to attack, forcing him to use Assault Excel again. However, Pigimaru doesn't have the stamina to maintain his extended form due to the immense strain the technique puts on his body. At that moment, Eve arrives on the scene, surprised to see that there are things that Tauka can't predict. Knowing he needs to maintain distance to fight swordsmen, Eve gladly offers her help. After telling Siraz to guard their rear and protect Liz, they go on ahead to fight the first wave of men. Tauka initially casts paralyzes on the men attacking, allowing him to kill them effortlessly. Meanwhile, the Duke approaches them with his elite vanguard, boasting about the fate that awaits Eve and Liz. He intends to make a coat from her skin for Liz. He will sell her to a brothel with the coat to attract more customers. This way they can live together as Eve always wanted. Unfortunately, he can't reuse this strategy because a message informs him that Paralyze has been used on maximum targets. Still, he manages to improvise on the spot, casting Dark instead. The effects of Dark work like a charm on the Duke's men, giving Eve the perfect chance to slice their throats. Amidst everything, Tauka notices that one man is trying to escape the battlefield. He orders Eve to make sure that no one escapes their assault. Using her keen sense, she strikes the man with a spear from miles away. The tide of the battle turns in their favor, making the Duke realize that Tauka is the real threat. He threatens to execute his men if they try to flee the battlefield and orders them to kill the man in black ASAP. When the Duke starts freaking out, Tauka realizes that casting Berserk would be a waste of magic points. Eve, on the other hand, thanks him for allowing her to feel the rush of battle again. She doesn't spare any effort in brutally chopping and slicing the men's heads, leaving them no chance to dodge or escape. The Duke is terrified from seeing the horrific scenes of manslaughter. He turns his horse around and tells Eve her crimes won't be forgiven. But Tauka casts Paralyze on him before he can move an inch. He is surprised that the Duke thought that escaping the battlefield with him was an option. With the Duke unable to move, Eve approaches him to finish the job. She would have found mercy in her heart if he betrayed her. However, the Duke wanted to sell Liz to a brothel, thus death is the only fitting option for him. Once the battle ends, Siraz steps out of the forest with Liz. Tauka appreciates her assistance with the bow to save Eve, though she knew that her actions would mean disobeying his orders. Instead of punishing her, Tauka appoints her the vice captain of their mercenary group. He gives her full command of the team with Eve's and Liz's permission whenever he is not around. Ultimately, he asks Ceres to take Liz and continue the journey, while they take care of the bodies. After the leave, Tauka uses his new skill called Freeze, which works as the name implies. Yet, the skill is much more complicated than one might think. He explains the freeze spell is durable if cast on living beings, but it shatters when cast upon objects like corpses, leaving no trace behind. He will erase Magi and his men's existence from his world and pin the blame for the Duke's murder on them. The story will be believable since everyone was killed by his poison spell similar to a curse. After a few hours, one of the king's men informs them about Ashinto's involvement in the Duke's death. He freaks out, knowing his plan to use the Ashinto in the upcoming battles is ruined. Plus, reporting this news to the goddess will be a hassle. After escaping from the forest, Ceres sets up camp to wash the stench of battle. Liz, however, feels uncomfortable staring at her beautiful body. She asks if her body will grow up to be like hers. Obviously, she can't answer that question honestly, and lying is not her habit. Still, such a question feels at her age. Apparently, the innkeeper told her she would be useless if her body remained the same. Immediately after hearing this, Ceres advises her to forget everything the innkeeper told her. Despite not knowing her for long, Liz agrees to forget everything the innkeeper told her. Instead, she wants to take her words to heart, putting a huge responsibility on Ceres' shoulders. Yet, she happily takes on that role, initiating a bond of sisters between them. Later that night, as Liz tightly hugs Eve and falls to sleep, Ceres offers to keep watch so Tauka can rest up. However, he is wide awake and can't fall to sleep, which forces Ceres to come with an insane idea. She is ready to lend him her lap to sleep, knowing this makes men fall asleep. Instead of accepting her kind offer, Tauka mentions that she is tired as well. He turns to the table offering to lend his lap to her. Unexpectedly, she takes the deal without a single thought, but moments later gets up, asking if he was sarcastically joking. Tauka slightly nods his head yet says it is fine. In fact, he thinks that things like this should happen more often. Since they are on the awkward subjects, he wants to quench his curiosity by touching her elf ears. After being so obviously desperate a second ago, she can't refuse this request. Naturally, Tauka takes his sweet time rubbing her ears until she starts feeling hot and uncomfortable. Eventually, she changes the topic, asking if Eve and Liz also remind him of his aunt, mainly because he treats them kindly. Unlike Ceres, Eve reminds him of his tough but kind uncle. Meanwhile, Liz is a spitting image of his rough childhood. Both of them were oppressed in harsh environments. However, the only difference is that Tauka Momori kills anyone who threatens him without mercy. For some reason, he reminds her that his journey is based on revenge and that Ceres can leave whenever she likes. But by now, even she is suspicious of the goddess of Alien. Furthermore, she can't leave after Tauka appointed her the vice captain of their party. Before calling it a night, he promises to reward her with anything in his possession once the goddess is dead. Afterwards, he forces her to sleep by casting sleep on her, knowing Ceres will stay on guard otherwise. Speaking of Alien, the S-ranker Ayaka, who made a deal with the goddess to fight of the other low-ranking heroes, trains with one of the best swordsmen in the country. Yet, Niantic wants to keep their training a secret from the goddess, otherwise she might unleash her anger on them. Despite all of the restrictions, Ayaka is curious as to why Niantic agreed to tutor her at night. Surprisingly, she sees a hint of her little sister in Ayaka, and thus wants her to survive in the world where either you eat or be eaten. On the other hand, Liz starts the new morning with a fresh look. She thanks Tauka for buying her the dress, but he thinks that her behavior is forced. However, she assures him that the dress is lovely and to her liking. As this conversation gets boring, Ceres advises Tauka to choose a name for their mercenary group. They will need to identify themselves after leaving the country. Thankfully, she has a suggestion in mind, saving him the trouble. Ceres wants to call themselves the Lord of the Flies Bregrade. This was the same name used by the Fly King from the demon army who protected his island to death. Soon, they reach the border of the Golden Demon Zone, where Tauka comes to the realization that his experience points are going to skyrocket. But he is not the only one who thinks this way. The goddess also gathers everyone to congratulate the heroes for coming this far. But now, they will train under the strongest people from different nations to acquire practical skills. After the little meetup, she informs Niantic of her plans to take the heroes to the Golden Demon Zone very soon. After killing the Ishinto and the Duke, Tauka and the others safely enter the Golden Demon Zone, a place filled with vegetation and rivers perfect for human life. But the demons in the area make it impossible for other species to live peacefully. In the first hour of entering the Demon Zone, Tauka's team does not face any beasts or demons, allowing them to breathe easily. Though pocket-sized, Liz insists on carrying the team's luggage herself, keeping them ready for any sudden battles and boosting their chances of survival. However, Ceres asks Eve to help with pursuing Liz, but she wants to respect and support her decisions. Even Tauka agrees with Eve, reminding them that Liz is a part of their mercenary guild and can make decisions for herself. With that debate settled, the group continue walking towards the center of the Demon Zone, and erring on the side of caution, Tauka asks Piggy Maru to scout the area for any signs of demons. Almost immediately, a monster similar to those Tauka faced in the ruins of Disposal approaches them from the forest. Before the others can make a move, he casts Paralyze and Poison, which work like before, but out of everyone only Eve noticed his true intentions were to test out a theory. Tauka confirms her suspicions, revealing that he feared Paralyze and other spells might not work on the monsters inside the Demon Zone. Yet, his experiment just now proved otherwise. Soon, when the monster dies under the effects of poison, Tauka starts to cut the monster's head, making Ceres curious, and just to stop her from standing too close, he gives her the book of forbidden items in which the monster was mentioned. The book reveals that the monster's severed head is a key ingredient for crafting one of the forbidden items, an object as dangerous as the voice-altering stone in his Black Fly King mask. Judging from her expressions, Tauka realizes that she's itching to get her hands on the forbidden item book, and before she can speak, he agrees to give it to her for safekeeping, knowing Ceres is trustworthy and responsible with objects. Moreover, Tauka's occasional favoritism motivates the others to work harder. Even so, he gave her the item with pure intentions, otherwise Ceres would have declined the gift. After storing the severed head, they face more demons, but as time passes, Tauka notices a difference in strength of monsters in the Demon Zone and the ruins of Disposal. In fact, he is disappointed that killing the monster would not reward him with enough XP to level up. Still, with their main goal being to hunt the forbidden witch, Tauka compromises with reality. When they reach a river, Liz insists on crossing alone to prove her independence. Despite Eve's concerns, Tauka chooses not to interfere, reminding her to respect everyone's decision, just as she said at the start of their journey. But just as she feared, Liz slips while trying to jump over a rock. Before she can even react, Tauka orders Pig Maru to help her regain balance, showing his keen sense of perception surpasses Eve. A few minutes after crossing the river, Tauka's disappointment with the monsters fades away, as Eve senses two giant monsters rapidly approaching them from the front. Unexpectedly, these monsters were the ones who forced Eve and Liz out of the forest. After ordering the retreat, Tauka hides behind a tree, the only safe spot from the monsters' countless eyes. As soon as they are in his range, he steps out and casts Paralyze and Berserk. This combination leaves the monsters helpless, quickly killing them and earning Tauka enough experience points to level up. Shortly after, Tauka draws his dagger and starts dissecting the monster, which makes Eve think he is going to eat it. Ceres refers the book of forbidden items, revealing that these monsters are used to make slime enhancement potions. Even so, Piggy Maru isn't ready to endure this type of torment. Suddenly, the air around them changes when Eve and Sarah sense a monster presence nearby which vanishes almost instantly. However, Piggy Maru points to Tauka, indicating him as the source of the mysterious presence. Without hesitation, he opens his travel bag, pulling out the cracked monster egg found in the ruins of the Skeleton King. Before long, a cute pony hatches from the egg. Despite the egg only hatching, Tauka and Eve immediately notice the horse growing before it even touches the ground, though the others remain oblivious. Even with Ceres's vast knowledge of magical creatures, she can't accurately name the monster's race. Still, luckily for them, the horse considers Tauka its parent. As he pats the creature's back, Tauka discovers a device, one that only monsters with magical absorption ability possess. After a brief thought, Tauka starts pouring his magic into the device, while the others stand at a safe distance. Carefully monitoring his mana, Tauka shares 1,000 Magin points, causing the horse to fully mature and turn black. With that, Tauka finally found himself a carriage carrier, which would allow Liz to rest. However, the horse asks him to continue pouring magic into his spherical device. Rather than remaining cautious, Tauka fulfills his request and feeds it 10,000 of his Magi points, and as a result, the horse turns into a giant with 8 legs. Undoubtedly, he is an interesting addition to their team, but the others are hesitant to accept him. Primarily, they assume that something so huge can attack them, but Tauka is assured that the horse thinks of him as a parent. Reluctantly, the others agree, though they insist Tauka name the horse before accepting it into the group. Seeing an 8-legged horse up close reminds Tauka of Odin's divine beast and companion Sleipnir, but he shortens the name to Slay for convenience. Not only Ceres but the horse also love the name, making him rub its tail in between her legs like a true beast of culture. In addition, Slay tells Tauka that he can willingly shift forms, but still doesn't stop teasing her with his tail. Meanwhile, the entire class of heroes also enter the Golden Demon Zone through the northern side of the forest. Certainly, their goal is to level up as quickly as possible by defeating demons, but Asagi, the leader of their group, is a cunning little fox who makes others pick up the heavy-duty tasks, allowing her to earn exp without breaking a sweat. Still, she isn't ashamed to take all the credit and make others feel indebted. At the same time, Takuto, the leader of another group, is sulking over the teachers treating them like children. For example, they weaken the monsters for the heroes to deliver the finishing blow and gain XP, but Takuto thinks that being treated like a child is an insult to S-ranked heroes. Hence, he needs to teach them a lesson and instill respect in the instructors. After spending the entire day hunting various monsters, the heroes set up camp and relax, with the teachers keeping guard. Before long, they sense a horde of powerful monsters coming their way, something the heroes can't handle on their own. The instructors line up the students, explaining their plan to injure the beast for them to land the final blow and earn exp. Yet, the sound of standing back irritates Yukata. However, he doesn't get the time to speak, as the monsters rush to attack the base camp. Instead of contributing to the fight, the girls stand behind, unable to face creepy monsters. Unfortunately, the teachers don't have the luxury to refuse. They go over their plan to immobilize the monsters for the students to get credit for the kill. As a result, the monster starts falling like raindrops, but the second wave of attack changes their directions to the back of the camp. The teachers continue to bark orders at Takuto to stay back, yet he ignores them like terms and conditions. Simply put, his confidence is backed by a level 4 unique skill Draconic Buster, summoning multiple dragons at the same time, defeating multiple targets and leaving everyone in shock. As his flares burn everything to ash, he introduces himself as the future ruler of all the Hoes and humanity. In the meantime, 2 girls from the group Hijiri and Itsuki encounter spies in the forest sent by another country. Startlingly enough, the spies committed suicide the minute they were discovered, revealing they were professional spies who feared revealing any information about their country. All in all, the girls still believe that the spies were sent by the goddess who wants something with their class. At the same time, Tauka and the others cover more ground than expected with Slay's assistance, granting them the leisure to rest for the night. Even though Tauka has been fighting monsters all day, he can't sleep while thinking about his revenge and the goddess. Earlier, he saw a glimpse of light coming from the northern part of the forest, and thought that a few monsters were fighting amongst themselves. With that said, she goes to sleep, and wakes up tomorrow only to find that Tauka and Piggy Maru left. Eve also wakes up from the commotions to assure her that Tauka isn't the kind of man who would leave them alone in the Golden Demon Zone. As little as it may be, she has observed his character enough to vouch for him. Just as Eve said, Ceres finds him outside beside a body of the human-faced beasts, a top-ranking monster in the Golden Demon Zone. Eve can't believe that he was defeated by the human-faced beast by himself, but Tauka still thinks it was weaker than the monster he is used to fight with. As he looks for ingredients that can be used for forbidden items, Eve voices her shock at the sight, but Ceres voices for him, claiming that Tauka is powerful. Deep down, she knows that their objective will be a piece of cake if Tauka remains by their side. Amongst them, he is the only one who can turn the impossible into possible. In any case, she doesn't want him to shoulder the burden of this journey alone, but to be his support at crucial times. Little by little, the humidity in the air grows denser, forcing Tauka to operate with a sense of urgency, and before long, they come across a large cliff. However, unlike before, they can't cross the cliff even with Slay's help. Hence, the team must travel around the cliff, following the roads built by men centuries ago. Within a few minutes, Tauka finds the perfect route through the east side, asking them to get a move on before it rains. Still above all else, Ceres and the others are worried about his health, and so they ask him to rest before continuing the journey. Evidently, Tauka pulls out the weather forecast for the next week, revealing the rain will stop them from traveling any further. Before that happens, they need to get as far as possible. Upon following the open roads on the east side, they head deeper into the Golden Demon Zone, but the lack of monsters around the area concerns Eve. Ceres thinks that this phenomenon might be caused by the Forbidden Witch's magic, who doesn't want anyone to find her location. As the two of them talk, Tauka checks up on Liz's health and asks if she is handling the Demon Zone like the others. Of course, a little girl like her would find it difficult to survive, but she is not afraid of the demons in the zone, mainly because of Tauka. Previously, Ceres told her that they will survive as long as Tauka is by their side, and therefore she is not afraid at all. This only adds more burden on Tauka's shoulders, as he doesn't want to betray their faith in him. Though, for a moment his hands start to shake out of fear of the unknown future, he calms himself down, promising to keep everyone alive. Ultimately, they come across an open land that should be filled with monsters, but they are none to be found. As the team discusses their future plans, a strange monster appears out of the blue and attacks them. Without wasting a single second, Eve draws her blood and slices of its head. Yet for some reason, Tauka can't shake the heavy feeling inside his heart. Just to be safe, he casts Paralyze on the dead body. But even so, it launches a signal for other monsters to attack Tauka and the other heroes. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.